Hey, my name's David Pierce, and today I'm going to be giving a presentation on how to ensure IFR compliance and airworthiness. So for this, I put together a PowerPoint slideshow to help me walk you through what is required. So before we even talk about IFR, I think it's important to first talk about what is required to fly at all. So some helpful things I've found to remember these are for documents, AERO, so current airworthiness certificate, a current registration, a radio station license if you're flying internationally, operating limitations, so that's your POH and any placards and markings inside the aircraft itself, and of course for the W is the weight and balance. Now for required day VFR equipment, you're going to need all this aside from what we need for IFR. So a good way to remember it is tomato flames. So the A being anti-collision light system. Now this one gets some people confused because if it's certified after March 11th of '96, whereas a lot of our aircraft we fly for training go before that. For the T is tachometer for each engine, so probably one tach for most of our training purposes. Oil pressure gauge, again for each engine if you have multiple engines. A magnetic compass, an altimeter, a temperature gauge, again for each engine, an oil temperature gauge for each engine, fuel gauge for each tank, a landing gear position indicator if you have retractable gear, airspeed indicator, manifold pressure gauge for each engine, of course your ELT, and safety belts. Now the only thing to add to this is if you're planning on flying over water for hire, you'll need flotation gear and pyrotechnic signaling devices. But even if you're not flying for hire, I'd recommend flotation gear for your own safety. And then possible supplemental oxygen if you plan to fly at higher altitudes that require oxygen. So night VFR, I like to use the term flaps, which a lot of people are familiar with. So one spare set of fuses, unless you have circuit breakers, which most of our aircraft do these days. Electric landing light, if for hire, but you'll see most aircraft have these anyway. Anti-collision lighting system, so again, we saw this in the first one, but for night, you're required to have it regardless of when the aircraft was produced and certified. The P is position lights, and the S is adequate source of electrical energy, so alternators or generators, which we'll see as a mandatory requirement for IFR flight. So now getting into the good stuff here is the IFR equipment. So we like to use the term grab card. So for the G, the generator or alternator, R is two-way radio communication and nav equipment appropriate to the facilities to be used. So this generally means you're going to need at least one VOR or certified GPS system. Most of our trained aircraft have at least one or two VOR nav systems installed, and a lot of them now also are equipped with certified GPS, DME, and all that sort of stuff. The A is altimeter, adjustable for barometric pressure, so that gives us a really good reading of the pressure altitude, or not the pressure altitude, but the current altitude where you're at. The B is the ball, so it's the actual little ball that gives you the skid slip indication in your turn coordinator. The clock, displaying hours, minutes, seconds, or a digital reading. So this is interesting. I have two aircraft I normally fly. One has digital readout, which is very helpful for timing missed approaches. The other one has an analog, which is extremely difficult to deal with, as you have to keep moving the hand around to try to visually look at when that second or third hand's going to come around. So I would recommend digital if you can get it. Attitude indicator, of course, which is extremely helpful, uses the vacuum system. Your rate of turn indicator, again the turn coordinator piece with the ball, also required. And D is a directional gyro, so that's generally what we refer to as your heading indicator. So again, that's off of Part 91 205 Delta. So then we have to go into the required equipment checks prior to an IFR flight. So a lot of people forget what's actually required once you actually have the equipment, but things that must be checked and certified before you fly. So your altimeter must be inspected within 24 calendar months before you can fly IFR. Your transponder, every 24 calendar months. Your ELT is every 12 calendar months. And a good time I would recommend to do that is when you have your airplane in for your annual. Your VOR needs to be checked every 30 days, and that could be checked a variety of different techniques. You can either use a VOT, an own-ship test, dual, and most of these can be checked either on the ground or in the air. However, recommended to do it on the ground if you can, as it is a more accurate reading normally. So once you check the VOR, these things here have to be annotated in order to make it a good check. So you need the date, your location of the check, the bearing error, and then the signature of the pilot who checked it. So those are the things that must happen before you take an IFR flight, both for yourself and for the aircraft. And of course, as an IFR pilot, you have to be current in order to fly IFR, which means within the 6 calendar months, you must have accomplished 6 approaches, intercepting, radials, holding, and again, that can be done on a certified simulator with a CFI, or it can be in the actual airplane itself. But you always, if you're going to be doing this in VFR conditions, you're going to need a safety pilot if you're going to go into the foggles to ensure you're safe while you're executing the approaches and holding and intercepting courses. So that's my presentation on IFR equipment, compliance, and airworthiness for IFR flight. Thank you very much.